Was Jesus of Nazareth truly a historical figure, or maybe more of a powerful narrative we've woven over millennia?
It's a huge question, isn't it?
It really is, and it's one that sparks debate for, well, centuries, and even modern skeptics often find themselves grappling with it. Welcome, everyone, to the Orion Patience show, where we take your curiosity and dive deep into fascinating topics just like this one.
That's right. Today, our deep dive takes us into a really incredibly compelling paper by Stan Mackey. It's titled Jesus, Real or Fictitious? A legal-style argument for the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth.
A legal-style argument. Okay.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to unpack the evidence he presents, almost like a lawyer would in a courtroom, to see if it satisfies that standard of beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's a high bar, especially when you're talking about ancient history.
It absolutely is.
All right, so Stan Mackey's approach here sounds particularly interesting because he seems to be consciously moving beyond, let's say, just the religious texts.
Yeah. That's key.
He's actively looking for independent sources. Historical records, writers who weren't necessarily followers, even archaeological finds to try and establish the reality of Jesus' existence. And right off the bat, he brings up something pretty significant, this idea that even prominent modern skeptics often concede Jesus probably existed. How does he frame that point?
Well, what's particularly fascinating there is how he opens with what he calls a hostile witness concession. It's a legal term, really.
Okay.
He points to figures like the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins. Apparently, in a 2018 interview, Joe Rogan asked him about it.
Oh, interesting. What did Dawkins say?
Dawkins admitted, and this is a quote Mackey uses, most of the scholars I've talked to say he probably was. The evidence is not great, but he probably was real. And he was ahead of his time, providing a kind of moral scaffolding.
Wow. From Dawkins, that's quite a statement.
It is, and this is a critical point for Mackey because, Dawkins isn't arguing from faith. He's coming at it from a completely different scientific perspective.
Right.
So for Mackey, the fact that even people highly critical of Christianity rarely deny Jesus' existence anymore, they tend to shift the debate to his miracles or divinity. That actually speaks volumes about the underlying strength of the historical evidence just for his life.
Okay, that makes sense. It sort of sets the stage.
Exactly.
So for our discussion today, we're explicitly focusing on that fundamental question, Jesus' historicity. We're not getting into miracles or theology here.
Correct. Just the historical figure.
And Stan Mackey is going to present, 4 key lines of evidence, like exhibits in a court case?
Yes, that's how he frames it. 4 exhibits he believes meet the threshold of what he calls trial-qualified testimony.
Okay. Trial qualified.
But before we even get into those exhibits, Stan Mackey makes this really critical distinction. It's absolutely vital for understanding his whole argument.
And that is?
The difference between proof and evidence. It sounds maybe a bit semantic, but it's actually foundational to how we look at history.
Right. He has that personal maxim he mentions. Proof is in the present. Everything else is merely supposition to varying degrees. Can you unpack that a little?
Sure. Think about it like this. If you weren't personally there to witness an event, say, you didn't see what I ate for breakfast last Tuesday, you don't have absolute proof.
Okay, I wasn't there.
Right. You could gather evidence. Maybe I posted a picture. Maybe there's a cafe receipt. Maybe I tell you what I remember, but you weren't there. So it's not direct, absolute proof in that sense.
Got it.
So in a courtroom, or especially when we're looking at historical events from 2,000 years ago, we're almost never dealing with that kind of absolute proof. We just can't go back in time.
Makes sense.
Instead, what we do is build a case using compelling evidence. Stan Mackey's point is really profound here. We're not aiming for some impossible standard of absolute certainty. The goal is to find a body of evidence strong enough to persuade a reasonable person beyond a reasonable doubt.
Just like a jury in a trial.
Exactly. And that's still a significantly high bar, especially for events way back then, where records are often patchy or biased or just plain lost.
So the aim is to build a strong, persuasive case for historicity, even for someone who might start out pretty skeptical.
Precisely.
And when Stan Mackey talks about trial-qualified testimony for ancient history, we're not actually putting Suetonius on the stand.
Right. No, definitely not. What he means is applying the same kind of rigorous standards we use for evidence in modern courts to those ancient sources.
Okay, how does that work?
It's about looking for corroboration. Do different independent sources mention the same thing? It's about carefully assessing potential biases. Was this writer trying to promote something, or were they hostile? and then determining the overall reliability.
So can this piece of information stand up on its own? Does it fit with other pieces?
Exactly. Does it contribute to a cumulative case that, when you look at it all together, would convince a reasonable person beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the challenge she's taking on.
All right, with that legal framework sort of set, let's turn to the first piece of evidence, or Exhibit A, as Stan Mackey calls it.
Okay.
This one comes from the Roman historian Suetonius, specifically his work The Life of Claudius, written around 120 AD. So that's within about, 90 years of Jesus' presumed lifetime?
Yeah, roughly. And Suetonius recorded these significant disturbances among the Jewish population in Rome during Emperor Claudius's reign.
What did he say happened?
He wrote, and this is the key part, since the Jews constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, he, Claudius, expelled them from Rome.
Chrestus. That name jumps out.
It really does. Stan Mackey points out, and it's pretty widely accepted by historians, that Chrestus is almost certainly a Latin spelling variant of Christus, which of course means Christ.
So you've got a Roman historian writing independently, not part of the Christian movement, documenting this imperial action linked to followers of Chrestus.
Yes, and what's really interesting is that this expulsion decree by Claudius, it's actually confirmed elsewhere in the Bible, in Acts chapter 18, verse 2.
So there's corroboration there too.
There is. And this isn't just some minor footnote. Mackey argues it suggests that within maybe 20 years or so of Jesus' death and resurrection, his followers were already numerous and influential enough in Rome, the heart of the empire, to cause enough trouble to warrant the emperor himself taking action.
Wow.
So the evidentiary weight, the sort of legal value here, is having independent Roman imperial testimony connecting Jesus' followers linked explicitly to Chrestus with being a known and apparently disruptive presence right there in the capital very early on.
Okay, that's a strong start. Exhibit A, Suetonius. So Suetonius gives us that glimpse into the early impact. But for Exhibit B, Stan Mackey brings in an even more direct Roman account, right? From another major historian, Tacitus.
Yes, Tacitus, a giant of Roman history. His work, The Annals, specifically Book 15, Chapter 44, written around 116 AD. This passage famously describes Nero persecuting Christians after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD.
And what does Tacitus say specifically about Jesus in that context?
He's remarkably direct. He writes, Christus, the founder of the name Christian, was put to death by Pontius Pilate, procurator of Judea in the reign of Tiberius.
Wow. Okay, that's very specific.
Isn't it? He goes on, but the pernicious superstition, repressed for a time, broke out again not only in Judea, where the mischief originated, but even in Rome.
So Stan Mackey must pull a lot from that short passage. What are the key confirmations he highlights?
He points out three crucial historical facts confirmed by Tacitus here. First, that Jesus, or Christus, actually lived and was executed. That's fundamental.
Right.
Second, that his death was specifically ordered by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius Caesar. Pinpoints the time and the authority.
Very precise.
And third, that his movement, which Tacitus clearly despised, calling it a pernicious superstition, didn't die with him. It persisted and spread despite Roman attempts to stamp it out.
That point about Tacitus being hostile seems really important here.
It's absolutely critical. Tacitus wasn't just neutral. He was openly hostile to Christians and their beliefs. He clearly thought it was bad news.
Yeah.
Yet despite that strong bias against them, he explicitly confirms these key historical events surrounding their founder. This isn't a follower trying to boost their leader. It's a disapproving Roman historian confirming the basic facts.
That hostile but credible witnesses idea again.
Exactly. And in historical research, that kind of testimony is incredibly powerful because the information is given despite the writer's bias, not because of it. It suggests Tacitus was reporting what was generally known or accepted as fact in Rome at the time regarding the origins of this group.
And the timing is pretty close, too, historically speaking. Jesus likely died around 30-33 AD. Tacitus writes this around 116 AD.
Yeah, about 80 years later. For ancient history, where sometimes you have gaps of centuries before someone is mentioned again, that's remarkably close to the events themselves. It really speaks to how quickly and widely the impact of Christus was felt.
Okay, so we have Suetonius and Tacitus, two major Roman historians. Where does Mackey take us for Exhibit C?
For the third exhibit, we shift gears a bit. We move from Roman historians to a Greek philosopher, Aristides of Athens.
Aristides.
He wrote something called the Apology of Aristides around 125 AD. And what's really significant is that it was addressed directly to the Roman Emperor Antoninus Pius.
An apology to the emperor?
What did it say about Jesus?
It's quite a detailed passage Aristides includes. He described Jesus as the Son of the Most High God, revealed by the Holy Spirit, descended from heaven, and was born of a Hebrew virgin.
Wow. Okay. That's getting into theological claims.
It is, he continues. His flesh he received from the Virgin, and he revealed himself in human nature as the Son of God. He was crucified, pierced with nails, and he rose from the dead and ascended to heaven.
That is incredibly detailed. It covers core elements of the Christian story of virgin birth, crucifixion, resurrection, ascension.
Right down to the nails. Now, someone might argue, well, isn't Aristides just repeating Christian beliefs he'd heard? How does Stan Mackey frame this as independent historical evidence? What gives it weight?
That's a fair point to raise. What gives this testimony its weight, according to Mackey, isn't just the level of detail, but the context and the purpose of the document.
The context being it was for the emperor.
Exactly. Aristides was known as a prominent Greek philosopher. This apology wasn't some hidden religious text passed around among believers. It was a formal philosophical defense of Christianity presented to the Roman emperor.
So it was circulating at the highest levels of power.
Precisely. Mackey argues this shows an undeniable acknowledgement of Jesus' life, the core narrative about him and his works within about a century of his death. And this acknowledgement comes from a respected intellectual figure presented openly in the highest corridors of Roman power.
So it demonstrates that these specific claims about Jesus weren't just fringe beliefs, but were known and being discussed publicly, even debated philosophically at the imperial level very early on.
Yes. Its significance for Mackey's legal-style argument is that it serves as contemporary corroboration of the main points of the Christian narrative, presented directly to the emperor himself. It shows these ideas were out there, being reckoned with.
Okay, interesting. Roman historians, a Greek philosopher addressing the emperor. Now, for the fourth exhibit, Stan Mackey shifts from written testimony to something physical, right? Archaeological evidence.
That's right. Exhibit D is the Pilate Stone, a really fascinating piece.
I've heard of this. It was discovered in Caesarea Maritima, wasn't it, back in 1961?
That's the one, an inscription carved in stone.
What does the inscription actually say?
It's partially fragmented, but the key part reads, "To the divine Augusti Tiberium." Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, has dedicated this.
Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, under Tiberius. That sounds exactly like what Tacitus mentioned.
It aligns perfectly, and this is huge. Stan Mackey explains that this inscription absolutely confirms Pontius Pilate's historic existence and his official title during the reign of Tiberius.
Why was that confirmation so important? Had people doubted Pilate existed?
Believe it or not, yes. Before this discovery, some critics actually did claim that Pontius Pilate himself might have been an invention of the gospel writers, maybe to lend historical weight to their story.
Seriously?
Wow. There wasn't much other independent Roman confirmation of him at the time. So finding this stone with his name and title clearly inscribed on it from the right location and time period, it effectively silenced those specific claims.
And didn't it also settle some debate about his title, whether he was prefect or procurator?
Yes, that too. That's a great point. There had been some historical debate because some sources called him procurator, while this stone calls him prefect.
So which was right?
Well, further research showed that both titles could apply, or that prefect was likely the correct title during his specific tenure in Judea under Tiberius. The Gospels often use the more general term governor anyway, but the stone provided the specific contemporary title.
So finding the stone actually helped clarify the historical accuracy of the context.
Exactly. It wasn't just semantics. It validated the historical setting described in the Gospels by confirming the existence and correct title of the key Roman official involved in Jesus' trial and crucifixion, consistent with Roman administration of that specific time.
That's incredible, the power of archaeology.
As Stan Mackey points out, the evidentiary weight of the Pilate stone is immense. It's like finding a signed document in a historical case. It's admissible as a physical exhibit, verifiable archaeological evidence, confirming the governor central to the crucifixion story.
It really is like finding that missing puzzle piece that makes the picture much clearer.
Couldn't have put it better.
Okay, wow. So we've walked through Stan Mackey's case now. We've got 4 quite distinct lines of evidence presented, like exhibits. Roman historians Suetonius and Tacitus, the Greek philosopher Aristides addressing the emperor, and finally, the concrete archaeological proof of the Pilate stone. And of course, we started with that powerful modern hostile witness concession from someone like Richard Dawkins.
And Stan Mackey really emphasizes that each of these lines of evidence, Suetonius, Tacitus, Aristides, the Pilate Stone, can stand on its own merits. They're independent sources.
Independent, yeah.
But when you take them together, he argues they form this robust chain of testimony. And it's this chain that he believes satisfies that demanding courtroom standard of beyond a reasonable doubt for Jesus's basic historicity.
He's not claiming absolute mathematical proof because, as you said, that's virtually impossible for ancient figures.
No, it's about compelling evidence, building a cumulative case.
And it circles back to that point we discussed earlier that even the strongest critics of Christianity today rarely try to argue Jesus didn't exist. The debate usually shifts immediately to his miracles, his divinity, the reliability of specific teachings.
Exactly, which, as Mackey points out, functions almost as a tacit admission. It suggests the base case for face basal. His historical existence is just too strong to realistically contest based on the available evidence.
So this really puts a question to all of us, doesn't it? When the evidence coming from these independent, sometimes even hostile sources points so strongly in one direction, how do we process that?
It's a challenge. How do we reconcile our understanding of history with perhaps our personal beliefs or our skepticism? Stan Mackey's conclusion, based on this legal style analysis, is pretty clear. Jesus of Nazareth was real.
He lived. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate.
And his impact was significant enough to be recorded by friend and foe alike, almost immediately, shaping history in ways that are just, well, undeniable.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. The way Stan Mackey lays it out like a legal case really gives you a whole new lens.
It does. It makes you think differently about how we evaluate historical claims, what counts as strong evidence, especially from the ancient world.
And it also makes you think about how we evaluate evidence in our own lives, perhaps. What standard of proof do we require for different things?
Absolutely. And it highlights that sometimes the most impactful figures in history are those whose existence gets confirmed not just by their enthusiastic followers, but also, maybe even more powerfully, by those who wish they'd never existed or wanted to discredit them.
That independent, even reluctant corroboration is just invaluable, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
So here's a thought for you, our listener, to maybe ponder on your own. If the basic historical existence of Jesus is as well evidenced as Stan Mackey argues here, what implications might that have for the other claims made about him? You know, the things Aristides mentioned, the claims found in those same historical contexts.
Where does that lead you next? It's a compelling question.
Definitely something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Stan Mackey's work. Jesus, real or fictitious? We really hope you've gained some new insights, maybe a few aha moments about how historical cases are built.
We love getting curious with you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.